So one of the things that became very apparent as I was going through my fellowship was that we had a lot of patients that were coming in and asking us what can they do? What helps? What makes a difference? And how did people deal with going through this? And it's something that we did have answers for, but we never really had a study to back our answers up. We had a lot of anecdotal information from patients, but we didn't necessarily have anything widespread that gave us information that we could pass on to individuals. As I previously mentioned, there are my disclosures. So this led to the idea of it would be interesting to ask you what helped, what made a difference, and so that we can take that information and then pass it on to others who are also in a similar situation. And these interests aligned with LISA and the UMDF, and fortunate enough to get some funding from them. So we were able to develop this survey that would increase awareness and give other individuals an ability to benefit from your collective experience. So we developed this online survey. It was electronic. Between the end of 2014 and early 2015, we ended up collecting 116 participants. 103 of them completed all of the questions, and 50 of them also completed a graphical tool at the end that we'll show you. All of the mutations were represented. The vast majority of them were the 11778 mutation, which is not really surprising. We also had a few individuals who were uncertain about their mutation, but we still included them as part of the study. And one of the interesting things that we saw was that patients complained that it wasn't an issue that they were grieving for their vision loss as much as it was that it made them sad. And the extent of how sadness impacted on their relationships, their independence, and their work, or whether they were in college, that all seemed to play into how much of an issue this became for them. And it takes time for them to recover from that. And if you can see here, the patients, over time, they did demonstrate that they felt better. But it took, in this case, almost 8 years at this point, for the patient to feel that they were back to where they had started from. Most patients, about 56%, followed this trend over time. When you looked at a subset of those patients that were typically the ones who had not been afflicted by the disease for as long, their sadness didn't improve as much. But again, we're only looking at about 5 years here. So time is definitely a big factor on this. In addition, there were a group of people who took the survey that had been afflicted with the disease for over 30 years. And in these individuals, you saw some fluctuation, and it did go back and forth. But overall, the trend was for them to end up back to where they were before they became afflicted. So what were the things that these people identified as being helpful for them to overcome this issue of becoming affected? And some of them were practical things, like orientation and mobility devices, learning how to use a guide dog and other things. Visual aids, the iPhone came up on quite a few things where it can be expanded, the image can be instantaneously expanded and shrunk depending on what your vision is like. But other issues such as being able to have some independence, being able to travel, being able to participate in sports, those sorts of things gave them group activities that seemed to help them and be beneficial to them. A family history of LHON, not surprisingly, also did play into this, in that there was more, social supports within the family. Other members of the family knew about the disease. Perhaps some uncles or other individuals were affected. So there were people out there who were living with it. It wasn't that they were dealing with this in isolation. There were various factors that seemed to make things worse. But the interesting thing for us was that the vast majority of them, the bottom of this list, academic underachievement, poor self-esteem, missing out on aspects of teenage development, medical problems, becoming pregnant, concurrent bereavement, all of these issues actually impact the general population as well. The two that did seem to manage with regards to their vision loss was the worsening of the vision loss after a year, and the early onset of vision loss causing issues in schools, specifically with bullying. Now, bullying is a big issue in terms of sadness and bereavement in patients, in young adults, and so that still applies to the general population, but the actual loss of vision seemed to impact that as well. The other thing that we looked at within the data and the way that the questions were designed inside the data set was to determine whether or not the individuals met criteria for certain things. One of the things that we looked at is major depressive disorder. Now, in the psychiatric literature, the way they diagnose somebody with something is based upon something called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual. It's a very thick book that outlines all of the different things which fit people into different groups of psychological issues. And so, based upon that, we looked at the DSM description for major depressive disorder, and almost half of the individuals did meet those criteria based upon the survey responses. Now, this is not as rigorous as going and asking somebody one-on-one, but it does give us a bit of guidance, and this is significantly higher than the general US population. It was also interesting to see that those who were older typically had a higher incidence of depression than those that were younger. The younger individuals at time of conversion seemed to be able to manage with it and deal with it a little bit better than those who were at more advanced years. Now, this plays into a lot of things. Your psychological well-being doesn't just determine how you interact with life on that one issue with regards to your vision. It affects your career goals, it affects your interpersonal interactions, and there's some question as to whether or not being able to continue in your profession was an issue for some individuals. So that's certainly something that needs to be explored further. In addition, we tried to decipher which things affected your ability to continue with your career and your interpersonal interactions. And there's a statistical measure called an impact rating, which is basically where you use the data set that you have and you look to determine whether or not this A is affecting B and to what degree is A affecting B. And abbreviated here, it's IR. And when you look at the interpersonal interactions area of the questionnaire and look at how much depression was impacting that, you find that the non-depressed individuals did statistically better. Now, this may not seem like a big thing, but we do actually have things we can do to help patients with depression. So being able to identify these sorts of things and being able to identify things that we have therapies that are out there already, clinically trialed, backed up, and approved, gives us some guidance that maybe there are other things that we can provide in addition to just dealing with the idea of trying to recover vision. Similar findings were found again with the impact rating. Again, we found that there was a clinically significant improvement in those individuals who were not depressed versus those who were depressed. And once again, age also seemed to have an impact on this. And so it appears that the younger individuals seem to be able to manage better. And part of this, at least from what we are thinking, was that individuals who are a bit younger were at a situation in their life where they could adapt their life to what has happened, as opposed to individuals who are a bit older, who now their life has to adapt to what their vision is. So their career goals and other things are a little bit more difficult to deal with. The other thing that we were trying to look at and decipher from this was what helped, who helped. And when we went into that in a bit more detail, we started looking at the medical resources, and we were quite happy to see that neuro-ophthalmologists were quite helpful. But it's important to note that not everybody saw all of these individuals. So when you look at a psychologist, for instance, it appears that only about 10 to 15% of individuals got any support from seeing a psychologist. But less than 50% of the patients who participated in the study actually saw a psychologist. And if you actually looked at the ones who did see a psychologist, over half of them found that there was a benefit. So they actually got more benefit out of a psychologist than they got out of a neuro-ophthalmologist. So the other thing to consider is that while we like to pat ourselves on the back thinking that medicine is helpful, actually family makes a bigger difference. And that's totally understandable. Family, friends, spouses, and other things are very important to these people, and it's understandable that this makes a big difference in people's lives. It makes a big difference in the general population's life. The other thing that was interesting, and we have more data that we can pass out from this, we were looking at specific electronic aids versus non-electronic aids. And the electronic aids did help, but the extent with which they helped seemed to vary also with regards to how old the population was. Some of the aids were more useful for others, and that's something that we're still working through from the data set, and it's something that we continue to explore. So this gave us a bit of a background, and we've just presented some of the preliminary data here to give you a sense of what we've collected. We're still passing through it. We're still getting some of our papers in preparation, and those are still being worked on right now. And part of this was to raise awareness of the concerns of the community and to be able to give us some information that we can feed back to you. So when you come in and ask us, what can I do that's going to help? We actually have something to back it up and to be able to tell you that this seems to help in this group of individuals. We're also in the process of trying to see if some of those aids that we had, if we can figure out a way to maybe run a trial or get some sponsorship to be able to develop those further to provide some additional supports outside of the vision area. I know a lot of today has been discussing about vision, but there is more to this disease than just vision. So I just want to leave you with a quote, that attention to emotional concerns of the visually impaired patient may be a powerful tool in the ophthalmologist's arsenal to combat further deterioration of psychological well-being and visual function. And I don't think that's any more true for any other disease than Leber's. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to have a panel of people to bring that information to life. So I have 5 folks that I'd like to have make their way up to the podium, and as they're making their way up, I'll introduce them. First will be my son, Jeremy Poinsino. Jeremy lost vision in the fall of 2008 at age 19 and is now a professional inspirational speaker. My very good friend, Maria Johnson, was affected in 2013 at age 50. She's now a blogger and podcaster, known affectionately to many of you as Girl Gone Blind. We also have 3 folks from the local area who work with folks with vision impairments. One is Jeffrey Gerhardstein, and he lives and works in Seattle. Jeffrey is a social worker with Sight Connection, a vision rehabilitation agency that serves a 4-county area in Washington state. His background is in mental health and counseling. According to Jeffrey, the role of a vision rehabilitation social worker is to help people resist the social isolation and stigma that can follow vision loss, and to help connect people to the blind and low vision community and to their everyday world in a meaningful way. We also have Hong Da Sao, and he has been legally blind due to LHON for about 20 years. He works in Tacoma, Washington for Pierce County Community Connections, Aging and Disability Resource Center. And we also have Camille Jasny. She lives in Seattle and has been visually impaired since age 5 and losing her sight in 2010. Camille is involved with numerous organizations working with the blind and those with low vision. And Jeremy, let me begin with you. Dr. Karanjia provided us with statistics about how people affected by LHON react and deal with it emotionally. Could you tell the group your personal LHON emotional journey story?
Hello, check 1, it's on, yeah. Mom, you already know my story, so we're good. Yeah. My personal story. So like my mom mentioned, I was affected at age 19. I was a sophomore in college, and my mom did a lot, as I'm sure you can tell. She did a lot to help me out. When I was losing the sight, was misdiagnosed with all the different things, optic neuritis, got a spinal tap, had a catheter in my jugular for 10 days for another treatment, misdiagnosis. And then my mom brought me to see a blind psychologist at the San Diego Center for the Blind. She brought me in kicking and screaming. I was not interested at all. I was like, Mom, I got this. I don't need to talk to anyone about it. This is not something I want to do. And then when I sat with this guy, Dr. Bob, he went totally blind due to diabetes at age 33. And so when I started telling him about what I was going through, and being 19 in college, I was complaining a lot. I said, man, having this no central vision is horrible. I hate it. And I would explain all the things I didn't like. And our sessions were about an hour long. And for about 58 minutes of the hour-long session, we would talk sports. Talk sports for 58 minutes, and the last 2 minutes he's like, Jeremy, so what do you think about your vision? I'm like, whoa, doc, we're going too far now. Let's keep talking about how bad the Padres and Chargers are. I can do that. And so we would start to do, like, the next session was 55 minutes sports, 50 minutes sports, and it would go less and less. And we would talk more about other issues. But when he would say things like, Jeremy, can you see that I have a photo, a frame with a photo on it on my desk? And I say, well, yeah, with no central vision, I can look above it and I can see that there's a frame there, but I can't see what's on it, Doc. See, that's the thing. I can see there's a frame, but I can't see what's on it. But he was totally blind. So he's like, oh, that's nice. You can at least see there's a frame there when you look up. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I shouldn't complain so much. And so when he would say things like that for me, or I would encounter other folks who would tell me things they were going through that in my eyes, I would say, oh my gosh, that's way worse, but we shouldn't really compare what we're going through. That put things in perspective for me. And so one of the biggest things for me was having things like that being put in perspective for me and making me realize that this isn't the worst thing. This is okay. I can get through this. If he went totally blind at 33 and he's doing fine and he's a professional psychologist, he's living a normal life, so can I. And so that was very helpful. And he was someone who could empathize with what I was going through rather than sympathize. Mom, you're great. Anyone else who's fully sighted, I'm sorry, I feel bad, but you can't empathize. You don't really understand what we're going through. So it was great to talk with him. But my biggest thing is, I think to adjust from being fully sighted to going through LHON, there's no one who can snap their fingers and be like, oh, I've totally got this, I'm fine. I think we all have to go through the adjustment process and the 5 stages of grief, where you first start out with denial, and then you go to anger, and then you reach bargaining. You say, I'll do anything, whatever it takes, I'll do whatever to make things go back to normal. Then you reach depression, and then you finally reach acceptance. But as Rustum says, that takes years and years and years to go from traumatic life experience to reaching acceptance. And so I think if you would have told me when I first lost my sight, one day you'll reach acceptance, I think you're crazy. You don't just say, hey, you'll get to acceptance, because that doesn't really make sense. But I'm 7.5 years into it, and I fully grasp that. I think I know I've reached acceptance now, and I've adjusted to this new way of life. The biggest things I'd want to say as key takeaways from this are perspective, like I had with Dr. Bob and other individuals, and just in general, keeping perspective with what's going on. Finding purpose in your life after this. So for me, it was raising funds for and awareness of LHON after this, and then finding a passion. So for me, being a golfer my whole life and then losing my sight, I thought, no way I can play golf ever again. Such a visual sport, that's done. But my mom, again, amazing, comes up and says, Jeremy, there's such thing as the United States Blind Golf Association. I was like, Mom, no way. Like, trust me, Mom, there's no way blind people can play golf. I thought she was kidding. But there is such thing. There are tournaments all over the world, and now I compete with my dad in blind golf tournaments all over the world. That's a passion of mine that I had before I lost my sight, and I'm still able to continue doing. And I'm playing in Florida in September. I'm playing in Japan in November. Those are things that, had you told me when I first lost my sight I'd be doing 7.5 years later, I would think you're nuts. So for me, it's having perspective, having purpose in your life, and having passion. That, with time and the people around you, that's what really helps you, I think, get through and be able to reach acceptance. Thank you. I'll pass to Maria.
Maria.
Okay. I'm Maria, and some of you know me also as Girl Gone Blind. I'm the one who writes that blog that has been out there, a little bit, out in the groups a little bit, and you may have read it, and if you haven't, you need to find it and read it. That will tell you a lot about me. There was somebody said something that has resonated with me that kind of describes how it was for me in the beginning, which was just 2.5 years ago. I was affected at 49. By 50, it was done. I was legally blind and wondering, what am I supposed to do now? The quote is, When one door closes, another door opens, but the worst place to be is in the hallway. Okay, right? I was in that hallway for a long time. That door closed on the sighted world, and I was kind of kicked out, and I was in the hallway, and that door to the blind world was open, and there was no way I was going there. There was no way. No, 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 no. I couldn't really go back to the sighted world as much as I wanted to, and I desperately wanted to go back to the sighted world and be Maria, who I was, because I was doing pretty well. And then I was in that hallway. And in that hallway, I pulled in a couch. I had a little kitchen. I had it all in that hallway because I didn't have to leave because I was going to stay there, because I was going to stay driving. I was going to still do everything I did before, but it was, I just had to make the hallway comfortable for a while. So I started to ask myself all those questions as different days and incidents would happen. Holidays came through, birthdays, and different activities that I wasn't able to participate in like I used to, which would then reinforce that I was blind. I would ask myself questions constantly. How am I going to do this? How am I going to be a good mom? How am I going to do all the things that I used to do? How am I going to make it to tomorrow? There were many days. How am I going to make it to tomorrow? Maybe I don't want to make it to tomorrow. Maybe I don't. But I knew that I had kids who relied on me. I had a family. I had friends. And my doctor told me, Maria, you're going to have to be an example for your friends and family. And like Jeremy said, you kind of go, you're crazy. Are you kidding me? How am I going to be an example? I don't even know how I'm going to live this life. So to start doing something about this, I would start to kind of crack open the door, go, well, what's over there? What's over there? Well, what was over there was the Braille Institute in San Diego. And I decided I'll go there. I'll find some counseling and I'll find out some information, and knowledge is power. Okay, I'm a big girl. I know this stuff. So we went, and it was 2 hours of so much information. I walked out of there almost worse than when I walked in. There was no counseling services at the time. I was depressed. I had anxiety. I was still dealing with loss of control, loss of independence. And all they pretty much gave me was, here, I'll sign you up for BARD. That's good. You need to read books. I'll give you the bus schedule and your Department of Rehab. And these are magnifiers, and here's some different light you can use. And I walked out there going, what the heck? Oh, the last question she asked me, that they had classes, and she wanted to know if I used to do any scrapbooking or art that I might want to do again. And I thought, are you kidding? I go, I don't even know how I'm going to dress myself in the clothes and figure out colors and all that stuff. And she goes, well, when you're ready, we can teach you how to knit. And I, no, I don't want to know how to knit. I don't. And so I walked away, not happy at all. I was even more overwhelmed, more thinking, how am I going to do this? So, like some of us, I go, well, I got this. And I started writing my blog. And that's how my blog was born, was I need to just write this out, and I need to get this out in the world, and I need to do something to make use of what's going on. So that's how Girl Gone Blind was born. I started putting it all out there. And in my early blogs, they're pretty dark. They tell it like it is. If you read it, I don't hold back. So then it got to the point where some things were going on. People were talking about traveling and all these things. And I was like, I'll never do that. Well, why would I travel? I can't see anything. And then I started to go downhill pretty quickly again. My vision took a big dive, 6-7 months in, big dive. And I went downhill. I was circling the drain. It was just waiting. So I called the San Diego Center for the Blind, where Jeremy went. And I said, I need help. I need counseling. I need therapy. Get me in now. And they did. And I ended up seeing a counselor. And her name was Shannon. And I ended up in group therapy as well. And the individual counseling was so valuable to me because I walked in a complete hot wreck. And she was able to say, you're not a hot wreck. You're normal. You're normal to be depressed and have anxiety and feel like you can't do all the things you used to do. That's totally normal. And I'm like, it is? And they go, yeah, we're going to work it all out. And then group therapy, I didn't want to be there either. And I was kicking it. When my husband dropped me off at the San Diego Center for the Blind, I was like, no. It's like a kid going to kindergarten. I'm like, no, don't leave me here. I don't belong here. Because That was in the new world. And I had fully stepped in, and I did not want to be there. But the group therapy, I met others who were dealing with many forms of blindness, had other issues, total blind. And I went, wow, these people are all doing it. Maybe I can too. But it took a while. And time is a key factor. It really is. I ended up going for about a year and a half every week. Every week. I almost look forward to that day. I'm like, yes, I have therapy, I have group therapy. And it's, it was just for me. And it was just for what I was going through. And it is something that your family and friends cannot do for you. They just can't. And I had to teach my family and friends how to deal with me as I learned how to deal with me. And slowly, my world started to blend, and I was able to live in that world, that blind world. I still go back in that hallway all the time. Don't get me wrong. That hallway has got some good stuff in it. And but I know it's not the right place to stay, and I stay in there less and less and less. Instead of days, I stay in there for maybe a day or a few hours. But I always come back out because I know that's not the good place to be. And a couple of things that my counselors and therapists said to me, I'll leave you with, is your family would rather have a blind mom than no mom. And that hit me because I realized, yeah, maybe they're right. And with every occasion or experience that I have, and I conquer it, quote unquote, as a blind woman, it reinforces that I can do the things I used to do. And I know, I hate it when people say, you can just do them differently, constantly. And I'm like, I don't want to do it differently. I want to do it like I did. But you do have to do them differently. So I can still be the mom, I can still be the fitness instructor, I can still be the blogger, but I do it differently. And I have to make it work because you really don't have a choice. And I knew I needed to be here. I knew I needed to be here for my family. Obviously, and it's been even more reinforced. I need to keep blogging, and because people do read it, and I get comments all the time on that. It helps them. So it does help me, but even better, it helps others relate or understand what it's like to live this unexpected life. So get out of the hallway. Get out of that hallway, no matter what you do. That was key for me, is get out of the hallway and help yourself.
Thanks, Maria. Jeffrey?
Hello?
Jeffrey, from the professional perspective?
Thank you. I saw somewhere in the materials sent me by Lissa a personal quote by one fellow living with laborers. Said, I have lost my sight, not my vision. How beautifully said. My friend Glenn, he was also a client for a long time with our agency Sight Connection and became a friend to us all. He lived with retinitis pigmentosa and glaucoma both. The RP struck Glenn as a young man. Before his death, Glenn asked me to tell his story. Glenn somehow put in a career at Boeing despite failing vision. Glenn raced cars right up until he couldn't anymore. Glenn bowled in leagues, and he taught bowling for most of his life. His best friends were fellow bowlers. One day I came to visit him and his Scottish Terrier, Max, and there had been another sudden vision loss. Jeffrey, it's nice to hear you. Glenn never stopped bowling. It's muscle memory, he explained to me. I tell you all this up front about Glenn, but the truth is there was a day Glenn stopped calling. Weeks, months went by. It wasn't like him. He was a chatterbox. He loved an old-fashioned phone call. What had happened was Glenn was suffering bouts of vision loss, vertigo, and disorientation. He and Max had gotten into some scary situations, literally losing his way on an old dirt road near his home, waiting for hours until a neighbor spotted him and came to the rescue. Vision loss can be terrifying. It can shut you down. It can make you want to hide from everything and everyone. So here's what Glenn and I want to tell you. Say please and thank you to all your friends and loved ones without fail, no matter how lousy a day you're having. You have lost sight, not vision. You will want to retire and withdraw. Some of that is normal and necessary. Give yourself the time to do so, but keep on hugging your loved ones tightly through it all, despite the down days and the days you don't call your friends or call your social worker. You still want to remain active no matter what, whether you're racing cars or you've had to stop, whether you're still bowling, whether you're still working, or you're attending a low vision support group. Learn to teach people how to treat you. You must teach others how to treat you in your new body with this new sight loss. Glenn stopped racing cars, but you know what? He was still in the driver's seat. He learned to direct traffic when it came to others, teaching others to announce themselves, teaching family and friends and caregivers not to move his stuff, teaching others not to fawn over him just because he had lost his vision. Ask for 100% of what you want, nothing less. Your sight has been stripped away. You may suffer anxiety or panic attacks. You may withdraw to the point of depression, so ask for 100% of what you want. You'll probably need a teacher in your life, a mentor, a guide. Please get one, seek out, and find one. We all need teachers through times like this. You'll probably need to connect with others in the same situation. Please take the first step. Join a local support group or advocacy group. Start a group when no group exists. You'll probably need vision rehabilitation services. Call and receive the services that can outreach you and train you in every last detail how to live with your new sight loss. Sight may come and go. Vision is what is in your heart, in your dreams, and in your will to carry on in this new body of yours.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Hongda, you've both affected and you work professionally. Can you share your thoughts?
Sure. Hello, my name is Hongda Sao. I live and work in Tacoma. I work for Pierce County Community Connections Aging and Disability Resource Center as a telephone case manager. But the road to getting a job and getting my life back was a very, very long one for me. I lost my eyesight in early 1996. One day I was driving home from work. I worked in Auburn and I lived in Tacoma. And I worked a night shift, and I almost struck one of the construction workers that was holding the sign on my exit. And I told my wife that something's wrong with my eyes. And that was the last day on February. After that night, I never drove again, and went to the doctor, got diagnosed, then discovered that I'm gonna be legally blind, most likely for the rest of my life. Due to a disease called Leber's. And I said, okay. I don't know how to react to that. Didn't know how to react to that. But tried to go on with my life, live normally. And I worked in a warehouse cutting wood. I make wood and stain sample, I work in a saw room. So basically I work with power saws and, sanders and everything like that, and lifting heavy objects. So I worked for a few months until I couldn't do it no more. I think it was the emotional part that I couldn't handle. The physical part, I don't think to me it wasn't that big of a deal. But slowly reality crept in and kind of shook me in a corner or on the shoulder and let me know that everything everything I know, everything that I'm ever going to know is never going to be the same again. I think by that time, that's something like that, those kind of thoughts creeped in my head. I think I fell into a deep depression. I never knew what depression was about. I was a lucky, go happy type of guy. At the beginning of I just had my newly born son. He was probably less than a year and a half. And then to know that I'm never going to see him again, never going to see my family again, and never going to be the person I wanted to be, that was the hardest part for me to accept. And so I went through all the emotional things that people usually deal with when they deal with tragic, big losses, But eventually, I took a long time to realize about what I needed to do, how am I going to do it, and where I'm going to go, where I'm going to be, all those things. For me, it was just a strange coincidence. Back in the summer of 2000, I just happened to be watching the TV, and the Summer Olympic came up, and the commentators were talking about a runner named Marla Runyan, and they said that she was legally blind, and she's ranked third fastest woman in the world. So I went up to the TV and I watched her lane, and I couldn't distinguish one person from another. Then I started thinking about myself, what's holding me back. Then I realized that was me mainly. I was my own worst enemy. I, was not kind, to myself. But eventually, I thought about the things that I can do, what I like to do, what my passion may be. I thought about going to maybe giving college a try. So I, enrolled into Pierce College and didn't know what to do, didn't know where to go, didn't know how to do anything. Had to learn how to use a computer, learn how to read and write, and learn how to do this being a legally blind person. It's a new experience and a frightening experience, but I did it anyway, and then I discovered that I love learning, and then my ultimate goal was to get a job to help people, because I've I've received so much help in my life already, and I just want to give back. With everything dealing with blindness, to me, it just feels like it took over my life. My vision loss, my blindness, everything was about that. Then over time, I started filling my life with more important things, more happy things, more good things. Then the blindness just became smaller and smaller. And I just, I continue to fill my life with goodness, fill my life with happiness. And then, my blindness now, I just see it myself as just dealing with a nuisance, I play sports. I love being active. I play a sport called goalball. That's a sport designed, created for the visually impaired. I played beep ball, and trying to do an event, a cycling event, like tandem bikings with Metro Parks. And I've run a few fun runs with Metro Parks, and hope to do more. But that's pretty much my life in a nutshell. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's more I can tell you, but it'll go on, and pretty sure you guys are getting hungry too.
Thank you,
Thank
Honda.
you.
And we are running into the break, so I don't mean to rush you, Camille. But we do want to hear all the wonderful things that, quickly the things you do that have added value to the community.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, you can hear me, right? Yes. This is a new experience for me. I don't know about this eye disease. I have 6 eye diseases, but this is not one of them. So, so now I talk with many people who are visually challenged. I started out when I was young with rheumatic fever and had uveitis, which is inflammation, then glaucoma at 12, and then cornea problems, many surgeries, and cataracts, and then retina problems and bacteria infection in my eye, and I went blind. And that was in 2009. I think I'm at peace now because I'm not having so many surgeries. People always say, what's it like being blind? And I don't have to keep thinking about what my next operation's going to be. But I was raised in a wonderful family, and my supportive, really great mom and dad. I'm married to a really wonderful husband. I have 2 sons, and I started losing my sight when they were young. I stopped driving when the youngest was 3 years old. So I told my two young boys then, and it still is that way, that anything they ever wanted in life to go do, I would get them there, no problem asked. We just had to plan a lot of advanced. What we're going to do has to be planned and on a calendar, which they never liked. Everything's calendar. So I worked with autistic kids until I lost really my vision, and that was a great experience for me. And then as I was losing my vision, I went through hypnotherapy to a therapist, and she said to me, you could be any Camille you want to be, because I was identified as the Camille with eye disease. Nobody really knew who I really was. It was just that Camille spent most of her life at the eye doctor's office. And so I got involved in a low vision support group 10 years ago, and I run it now. I've been running it for quite a while, and we meet for the Seattle people, because I'm a Seattle person. We meet the first Wednesday of the month, and I'll be happy to give out that information later. But we meet, and I get maybe, our smallest group is 8. We get up to 14 people usually or more, and they come and we talk for probably a good 2 hours. I call it an hour and a half conversation, but they're there early. And we talk about what it's like living with vision loss. And we support one another. And I think what everybody on this panel has talked about is it's really important to have the support from some people. Get therapy, get something so that helps you realize that you're not isolated and alone, and connect with groups of people. I do an art class with people that are blind and low vision. I'm involved with the Seattle Art Museum with their Art Beyond Sight. I'm on the board for the University of Washington Eye Institute, a CAB member, and I co-chair the outreach committee. I'm also an artist, which I have to say I found my life through art, because I've always been an artist, and I do tactile art, and I sell it. Tomorrow I have a big sale. And so it's, I make copper wire with flowers, with buttons into flowers. And I also do collage art, which is also very tactile. So I really love it. It's given me a lot of great satisfaction and self-worth, which is really important for people that are blind and low vision, or any disease. You have to find a passion. I exercise. I have a trainer twice a week come to my home so that I can make sure that when I fall and bump into everything that I do, that I won't hurt myself seriously. My husband and I have been tandem biking for 32 years, and I love the freedom that it gives me. I feel like if I want to do something, like we travel with my guide dog, Brietta, there's no barriers. You just have to work within your situation and be an advocate for yourself. And that's what I really hope that people will become as they go into this situation where they lose their sight and go inward. Go out and meet people and find what works for you. If a white cane isn't the right thing, then get a guide dog. Having a guide dog has been absolutely the best experience I've ever had. It's given me the independence I need. And people say to me, are you training this dog for someone? I go, no, I'm blind and proud of it. But people don't realize that you can be a blind person and be an active person. And I think it's really important. And I work with Jeffrey with Sight Connection. He gives me names of people who I can talk to. I do a lot of phone outreach. I may never meet this person in my whole life, but they call me and we talk on the phone about what it's like. What is the feeling? Everybody has so many different issues over losing your sight. I mean, the independence, that you can't drive, the fact you can't read anymore. There's options. It's not all the best, but I think the best thing to do is to find what works for you, and not to be so hard on yourself, because it's as I tell my people in the support group, some people have not lost all their sight, but it's a chronic eye disease issue, and treat it as you can make it to the best to your ability. Find what you like doing, and that's really important to me. So thank you very much.
Thank you.